If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have sworn my life was finally on steady ground. After a string of dead-end relationships, I'd met someone who felt different. Not perfect, nobody is, but warm, grounded, and steady. Her name was Lena. She had this way of looking at you like she'd been waiting to hear every word you were about to say. It pulled me in before I even realized it was happening. We met through work, not the romantic movie kind of meeting, just an accidental overlap in projects. I was still technically married at the time, though my wife and I had been little more than polite strangers for over a year. Lena was easy to talk to, dangerously easy. What started as coffee breaks stretched into lunch hours, and before long, we were messaging each other well past midnight. I told myself it was harmless, just a friendship that lit up parts of me I'd forgotten existed. But harmless things don't keep you up at night wondering how it would feel to kiss someone. Harmless things don't make you rehearse excuses to stay later at work just for a few more stolen minutes. By the time I admitted to myself I was in love with her, I'd already crossed lines in my heart that I couldn't uncross. When I left my wife, I didn't tell anyone Lena was the reason. I spun the story about growing apart, about wanting different things. The truth was messy, and I didn't want to give people the chance to look at me differently. Because deep down, I knew I'd already betrayed one vow for the rush of a new beginning. Lena and I didn't waste much time. Within a year, she was pregnant with our first child. Holding our son for the first time was a moment that almost washed the guilt away. Almost. We settled into family life, 2 kids in the next few years, a house, routines. I told myself I'd traded that impulsive side of me for something lasting. I'd planted my seed and built something worth protecting. And for a while, it worked. We were a picture of stability from the outside, neighbors waving when we took the kids to the park, birthday parties with balloons and too much cake, photos on the fridge of beach days and messy ice cream faces. But I've learned something about life. What you bury never really disappears. And one day, without warning, the ground you thought was solid can shift under your feet. The first signs weren't obvious. That's how these things work, tiny fractures you only recognize in hindsight. At first, it was small changes. Lena started dressing differently for her errands. A swipe of lipstick before running to the grocery store. A dress that I hadn't seen in years suddenly making a reappearance for a coffee with a friend. I noticed, but I told myself not to be paranoid. We still had moments that felt right, laughing in the kitchen over burnt toast, falling asleep with our youngest sprawled between us, her hand occasionally finding mine under the blankets. But there was a shift I couldn't name. She started leaving her phone face down on the counter. She guarded it like it was a fragile animal, never out of reach. I told myself it was work stress. Her company had been going through changes, and she'd picked up more responsibilities. Late nights, extra meetings, it made sense. I wanted to believe it. God, I needed to believe it. Then came the silences. We'd be sitting on the couch, and I'd glance over to find her lost in her screen, her smile faint, not for me. If I asked what was funny, she'd say, "Oh, just something stupid," and lock her phone. I brushed it off, the way a man does when he doesn't want to open a door he's scared to look behind. Because I'd been on the other side of this once, years ago. I'd been the Lena in another marriage. And maybe part of me thought I deserved it. Still, there was something in the air, like the faint smell of smoke before you see the fire. And I knew, sooner or later, I'd have to find out where it was coming from. It was a Wednesday night in early spring, the kind where the air still bites but you can feel warmer days circling. Lena had said she was meeting a few coworkers for dinner to celebrate finishing some big project. Nothing unusual. I put the kids to bed, cleaned up the kitchen, and sat down with a beer and the quiet. Around 10 I texted her. "Everything okay? Kids are out. Don't stay out too late." No reply. An hour passed. Then another. By midnight I'd given up on sleeping and was sitting in the dim light of the living room when her phone buzzed on the counter. It startled me. Lena never left her phone at home. The screen lit up with a preview of the message. Just a name I didn't recognize, Ethan. And beneath it, a single line. Can't stop thinking about you. Same time Friday? I froze. My mind refused to process it, even as my hands picked up the phone. No passcode. A mercy, or maybe she just never thought I'd look. The thread was short but full of the kind of messages you don't send to just a friend. Plans for lunches that never made it to her calendar. Jokes that carried an intimacy I hadn't felt from her in months. One message in particular gutted me. Lena, wish I could be there tonight instead of this boring dinner. Ethan, you know where I am. Doors open. My chest felt hollow, like something vital had been scooped out. And still, part of me wanted to explain it away. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe I was overreacting. But you don't tell a man. Doors open. If all you're offering is coffee. I put the phone down, face down, exactly where I'd found it. By the time Lena came home, hair slightly tousled, cheeks flushed, that faint scent of cologne clinging to her, I had my mask on. I didn't ask anything. I didn't accuse her. I just watched her move around the kitchen like nothing had happened, and I knew the fractures were widening. After that night, something in me switched. I stopped trying to explain things away. Instead, I went quiet. Careful. I didn't confront Lena. I didn't hint that I'd seen the messages. She was smart. If she sensed suspicion, she'd just get better at hiding it. No, I'd learned a long time ago that if you want the truth, you don't scare it off. You let it walk right into your hands. I started small. I paid attention to the details. The way she always seemed to leave 10 minutes earlier than she needed to. How her makeup was more deliberate on days she had meetings. The shifts in her tone when she talked about work, names she used to mention casually never came up anymore, and one name, Ethan, was never spoken at all. I checked her mileage one afternoon before she left. When she came home, it was 40 miles higher than the round trip to her office. Then there was the Thursdays she claimed she was working late. I drove by her building on my way home from a client meeting, no sign of her car in the lot. I parked a few blocks away and waited, telling myself I was insane. At 7:42 p.m., I saw her. Not walking toward her office, but stepping out of a coffee shop a mile away, laughing at something Ethan had just said. He reached out, brushed her hand as they walked to his car. She didn't pull away. I didn't follow them that night. Not yet. The thing about catching someone in a lie is, you only get one chance to do it in a way that leaves them no exit. So I waited. I gathered. I planned. Because deep down, I knew the day was coming when the quiet would end. And when it did, there would be no going back. It was a Friday, the same night Ethan's text had mentioned weeks earlier. Lena told me she'd be staying late again, some quarterly review that might run until 9. I nodded, kissed her on the cheek, and told her not to overwork herself. The moment she pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my jacket and keys. I kept enough distance so she wouldn't catch my headlights in her mirrors, hanging back half a block and letting other cars slip between us. Instead of heading toward downtown like she said, she took the highway west. Out of the city, past the office buildings, past the exit to our neighborhood. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. 20 minutes later, she pulled into a small side street lined with apartment buildings. Her car slowed, then turned into a lot beside a gray building with worn brick and a flickering security light. She didn't get out right away. I watched her sit there, phone in her lap, until a tall figure emerged from one of the side doors. Ethan. He walked straight to her car like he'd done it 100 times, leaned down, and kissed her through the open window. My chest went cold, but my mind was quiet, too quiet. I'd imagined yelling, storming up, dragging her home. But instead I just watched. She got out, smoothed her hair, and followed him inside. I stayed there for over an hour. Lights glowed behind the curtains of his third-floor window. Shadows moved, 2 figures crossing and recrossing the narrow space. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. When the lights finally went dark, I started the engine. I didn't drive home. I didn't even know where I was going. All I knew was that the ground had shifted again, and this time, I wasn't sure I could keep standing on it. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't even come home until long after midnight. When I finally walked in, the house was dark except for the kitchen light she'd left on for me, a small gesture that felt almost insulting now. She was already asleep, or pretending to be. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a long time, watching the slow rise and fall of her breathing, wondering how many nights I'd been lying next to a stranger. Over the next week, I played my part perfectly. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings. I laughed at the kids' jokes over dinner. I asked about her day and acted interested in her vague, watered-down answers. But when she wasn't looking, I was loading the scales. I went through our shared accounts, printing statements. I copied messages from her phone onto a flash drive while she showered. I took photos of her car parked in front of Ethan's building on another late night. I wasn't just gathering proof for myself anymore. I was building an airtight case. If this was going to end, and it was, then I wanted to make sure there was no space for her to twist it, no room for her to paint me as paranoid or controlling. Part of me still searched for a reason not to pull the trigger. Some tiny corner of my mind clung to the hope that she'd look at me one morning and confess everything, beg for forgiveness, maybe even make me believe her. But each night she walked through the door smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, that hope got smaller. And the scales got heavier. I knew the moment was coming. The only question was how public I wanted her world to collapse. It was a Saturday night when I finally stopped pretending. The kids were staying at my sister's for the weekend, and Lena had dressed a little too carefully for grabbing drinks with coworkers. She stood in the hallway mirror, adjusting her earrings, smiling at herself like she was about to step into a different life. I waited until she reached for her purse. "Where are you going?" I asked. My tone was calm, almost casual. She froze just a fraction of a second too long. "I told you, Lisa's birthday. We're meeting at the pub on 5th. I nodded slowly. That's funny. I was thinking about going there tonight myself. Wonder if Ethan would mind. The name landed like a hammer. Her eyes snapped to mine, wide, pupils shrinking. What, who? I know, I said, cutting her off. I've known for weeks. The late nights. The apartment on Westbrook. The texts. The photos. All of it. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She sat down on the bench by the door like her legs had given out. "It's not what you think," she whispered, a pathetic reflex. I laughed, short, humorless. "It's exactly what I think. I've got enough proof to fill a file cabinet, Lena. I'm done playing stupid." Tears welled instantly. "Please, it wasn't supposed to." "Wasn't supposed to get caught?" I asked. "Because that's the only thing you're sorry about right now." She reached for my hand. I stepped back. The air between us felt heavy, dangerous. "You already destroyed what we had," I said. "The only thing left is how much damage you take with you when you leave." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she whispered, "You'd really do this? After everything we've built?" I met her eyes cold. "We didn't build this. I did. You were just decorating it while making plans to move into someone else's." Her face crumpled. I walked past her, opened the front door, and left. I didn't slam it. I didn't shout. But when it closed behind me, I knew it was the last time I'd ever see that house as my home. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing. "Lena, 3 missed calls." I didn't answer. I drove with no destination, just the hum of the road and the dull throb in my chest. Every few minutes, the screen lit up again, sometimes her name, sometimes an unknown number. I knew she was using coworkers' phones when I ignored hers. I stopped for gas just to have something to do with my hands. While I stood by the pump, a text came through. "Lena, please, just talk to me." It was a mistake. "I can explain." "Explain? How do you explain months of lying, of letting me kiss you goodnight while your heart was somewhere else. I put the phone back in my pocket without replying. When I finally pulled into my sister's driveway to check on the kids, she took one look at me and knew. "You don't have to tell me now," she said softly. "Just, whatever you're about to go through, don't let her spin it in front of the kids." That night I slept on her couch. My phone lay face down on the coffee table, buzzing until the battery gave up. By Sunday morning, the messages had shifted. From "I love you," please, to "How can you do this to me?" From "We can fix this," to "You're ruining our family." I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I drafted an email to a divorce attorney, attaching the photos, screenshots, and logs I'd been collecting. Every piece of proof was a nail in the coffin. By Monday, she was waiting outside my office building. She tried to step in front of me on the sidewalk, tears streaking her face. "You can't just erase me like this," she said. I looked at her for a long moment. "I'm not erasing you, Lena. You did that yourself. I'm just making it official." Then I walked past her without looking back. The first time she was served, she called me 13 times in a row. I didn't answer a single one. I imagined her standing in the doorway, clutching that thick envelope, flipping through pages she couldn't talk her way out of. She showed up at my sister's house that evening, mascara smudged, holding the papers like they were an eviction notice from her own life. "You really did it," she said. "Yes," I replied. "And I'm not stopping." That was the last calm moment. Over the next weeks, she tried every angle, remorseful one day, furious the next. "We have kids," she'd remind me. "You're blowing up their lives." "No," I'd say. "You did that the second you decided your vows were optional." My attorney moved fast. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered, texts, photos, mileage records, went into the file. When her lawyer tried to suggest emotional disconnect as the cause of her affair, mine slid the folder across the table without a word. Her attorney's face fell as he flipped through it. The court process was clinical, almost cold. No screaming, no grand speeches, just dates, signatures, and the slow slicing apart of what had once been a marriage. But outside the legal walls, she was unraveling. I heard from mutual friends that Ethan had ghosted her the moment he found out about the divorce. Her coworker nights had stopped entirely. Even the people she'd once leaned on were keeping their distance. No one wanted to be the next name in a scandal. By the time the custody discussion began, she dropped the fight for full custody. I think she knew the court would see the proof of her double life. In the end, she settled for joint custody, weekends and alternating holidays. The day I signed the final papers, I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. But it wasn't joy. It was the relief of finally putting down something I'd been carrying far too long. She, on the other hand, walked out clutching her purse like a lifeline, staring at me as if I'd just taken away her future. She was wrong. She'd thrown that away herself. After the dust settled, I found myself sitting alone more than I expected. The house was quiet on the weeks the kids stayed with Lena, and in those silences, I thought about the whole twisted arc that had brought me here. The truth is, I'd been on both sides of betrayal. Years ago, I'd been the one slipping out early, hiding my phone, telling myself I deserved the thrill of someone new. Back then, I convinced myself that what I'd done was different, that it was about love, or connection, or some noble-sounding word. But sitting here now, looking back at Lena's lies, I realized the symmetry. The same small betrayals, the same rewriting of history, the same way you justify tearing someone else's trust apart because it feeds something in you. The difference was, I'd convinced myself I'd left that behind. I'd believed planting my roots with her, kids, home, life, had buried that part of me. Maybe it had. But the soil we'd built on was never as solid as I thought. Her cheating didn't just end our marriage, it forced me to stare in the mirror and see the man I used to be. I hated that man. I hated that I'd ever made someone else feel what I felt standing in Ethan's parking lot that night. The kids are my anchor now. Everything I do runs through the filter of whether it makes their lives better or worse. I can't erase what happened, what I did years ago, or what she did to me, but I can decide what comes next. Lena tries, every now and then, to reach across the divide. A text about the kids turns into a memory she wants to share, a little nostalgia in her voice. I keep my replies short, polite, distant. Because I learned the hard way that once you've burned the bridge, you don't rebuild it. You let it fall into the river, and you walk away. And you don't look back.